Hello and welcome to another episode of Mustard Education. My name is Paul and this has been an exceedingly frustrating week. Stop! This week I brought on the keyboard because they've both been asking to learn to play it, but instead of playing it they're just making noises really and not really wanting any help with it. It is Wednesday the 17th of September and gosh, this kind of thing really can make your mind swampy. Aches rather than good thoughts. But algebra, something they didn't quite touch on at primary school, and so it's what I've been tackling today. So with the app that I have, I've been writing down the questions, and you've got to simplify the equation essentially. It's all quite easy once you've been doing them after a while, but they're really easy ones such as 5x minus 10y minus 10x plus 10y, and the answer is minus 5x minus y. But it gets more complicated when you have things in brackets, the parenthesis. Multiple choice questions you have on this app, but by working through it, not looking at the answers, you get a much better grip of what it is you're supposed to be doing. That's what I've been trying to do with them. It's just occurred to me that actually what we could do with is where the clock is over on that wall there, is have a nice big whiteboard. Because these things work better as an explanation if I actually work through how you work one thing to the next. Well, they might do in a school, I suppose. You have a whiteboard or a blackboard. You explain it on a big board so everyone can see it. Maybe that would be better there, to get rid of that horrible generic picture that I keep complaining about. But the only thing is, it's over the top of the fish tank. Bit difficult to reach. So the other side of the kitchen is going to have to be where it goes. They're having a bit of a break at the moment because we've been doing these algebra sums for the past hour. And although I've managed to concentrate and quite enjoyed doing it, I can see quite a lot of enthusiasm dwindling. And once that starts, you may as well be just going on to do something else. So 5-minute break and then on to some geography. One of the more successful studies so far has been geography, because they like geography. They always have done. They've always been interested in places around the world, and more recently they've become quite fascinated by South Korea and Japan. But this week I decided that we'd take my choice, and I think it's important that they learn about Great Britain. However, they just didn't really engage with it quite as much as I was hoping. They still wrote about it. They still spent a good while sat down thinking, writing and listening. But I just didn't get that same sense of excitement about this country as one on the other side of the world. Considering that I am their first teacher, I know how they learn. And probably like most people, they don't like to be forced into things. If there's any resistance at this age, you've kind of got to back off a little bit. Let them take it in their own time. Just come back to it afterwards and do something that they are really interested in the meantime. To a degree. One of the ways we often start our day is actually just going for a walk. Going for a nice walk for maybe half an hour where we can chat and get into the idea of things that we want to do next, etc. Poisonous or not poisonous? It's Thursday and we got up a bit earlier so we could take the dog for a walk around Kingsway Business Park. Not sure why that was such a fascinating thing. However, one thing I've noticed about Kingsway Business Park in the past is because so much of it isn't actually in use yet. It's just these empty roads, empty bits there. There's some industrial units, but then there's all these big, wide, empty roads with nothing going on. It's really quite surreal. And that got me thinking, and it got these two thinking as well, about liminal photography and just liminality. So I've set them a task today to go and read up about liminal photography. And we've been talking about it quite a lot, the surreal, uneasy imagery of the whole thing. So they're going off to read about it again and then make some notes and try and do some pictures. I think actually I need to get them to take pictures rather than try and draw them, because trying to draw something liminal really doesn't work, especially when you start getting the coloured pencils out. So the plan is next week to take this a step further in the evening. And that's great because it won't be taking up the school time, essentially. But we'll be going on a trip for education to Manchester on the train to go and find liminal spaces to take pictures of, to further excite that part of the mind that just finds these kind of things interesting. There are loads of places like that in Manchester. Manchester's a bustling city, yet you go a couple of streets down and you'll find these really dark, dingy looking places under bridges lit up by sodium lamps. It'll be good. I'm looking forward to that. Last night we took a trip to the range to buy a blackboard. It was supposed to be £3.49. Turned out to be £7, but I couldn't be bothered to argue, so just bought it. It's not particularly good quality. There's nowhere to put your chalk. I guess you could leave it on the top of there. But the idea is, of course, this can be used for maths in particular, writing down solutions, breaking things down, etc. But the board itself, it's not slate, obviously, not for £7. It's just kind of a rough plastic, and it works, but it's... Trouble is, the old slate boards, they're going to be pretty expensive, aren't they? You're going to need some really good fixings to stick it to the wall as well, because this is just stuck in with some double-sided tape. Anyway, it's easier than trying to just scribble things down on paper. Well, there's a practicality to it, because I can just stand there whilst they stay at the table. I can write big enough so they can see what I'm doing. But every time I catch it in my eye, it looks like a TV on the wall. I guess that's what we're used to, isn't it? We have something on the wall, there's going to be a TV. Anyway, they're very quiet upstairs, so let's hope it's because they're knuckling down and really reading something proper, rather than just having a nap.
I got 13x plus 3y. I got 40x minus 15y.
I'm pleased to say that maths went well on all 3 days, actually. It's been nice seeing them get into something that they never really enjoyed at school, knowing also that at high school they probably wouldn't have got along with it too well either. And that's been my biggest concern. My concern has been they've got to actually get ahead with this kind of thing, because if they do end up in a school, I don't want them being in a low group in maths, because then you're going to be mixing with a lot of people that are just messing around. And then, you know, the messing around really does get in the way of learning. When I was at school, I got put into a low group for maths because I wasn't quite getting some of it. Partly because I spent an awful lot of time just looking out the window and just dreaming of places far away and thinking of where's that plane going and doesn't that transmitter look like a giraffe, etc. I definitely don't think it's because I just don't have that kind of logical mind to get to grips with this kind of thing. But the trouble is, once you end up going into one of those lower groups, you end up with more messing around, more of this thing that makes it difficult to learn. And I remember being asked to go to the front of the class and write down what it was the answer to this particular question was on the blackboard. And there was this girl at the back, this small ginger-haired girl that was always gobbing off. I lost my temper and I chucked the blackboard rubber at her head. It didn't hurt her, but guess what? I didn't get in any kind of trouble whatsoever. Bag of seeds, bag of out-of-date seeds. And presumably, I'm going to assume that they can still work. But you need to find something that will definitely, or most likely to grow at this time of year. So, purple beans, I think. Marigolds. Oh, that looks like a box of matches. Oh, these pink ones here, they look more like medication than anything. Dwarf Kenyan bean Ferrari. Dwarf Kenyan bean Ferrari seeds.
That's a daughter soup. How many times do I have to tell you that? Let's rinse the soup. So first what we need to do, we need to take all the leaves out. Kimchi. No, this is not what we do. But what? Throw all these out and then take all of these. Then just scoop up the rest.
Grandma Bailey soup.
No, Grandma Bailey soup isn't finished. No, and then she pour Grandma's Bailey soup out. No,
Just tip it away.
please, can I do that? I'm gonna do the rest of it.
Hello, little goaties. Goaties! I'm making a chilli, but I suspect it won't be quite hot enough. What about this? Do you reckon that will be?
I cleaned this out. Do you remember that time when
The rest of the week was spent cooking, going to the train station, hanging about with the dog, doing all these kind of things. And it's been... Maybe I am beginning to expect a little bit too much. Maybe I'm expecting them to wake up and being full of enthusiasm right from the start, right to the end. But what happens is they get tired. They get tired of just constantly taking on information. And I get tired of trying to keep giving them information. So I've got to not expect so much out of them. I had one occasion on Friday afternoon where I just went off and sat in the other room by myself because it's not they weren't understanding what I was talking about, but they just kept getting distracted, and it did really begin to annoy me. I can't imagine just how difficult it must be for a teacher with 20 children and you've got that kind of thing going on. Half the trouble is they find each other incredibly amusing. They won't admit to being best friends, but they really are. One day they will admit that. But in the meantime, I am battling ever so slightly with this tendency for some little tiny thing to pop up and they both just go off on a tangent, finding it absolutely hilarious. If there's one thing I think could possibly do them good at school, it's not the social side of things at all, but just being the good kids in class. Being the ones that don't mess around because they can see how disruptive it is when other people are messing around. And I think when you can see that, it puts into perspective just how bad it is without actually being the protagonist. Anyway, that's it for this week. So thank you very much for watching this. And hopefully I'll have lots and lots of positive things to tell you next week. Bye-bye. Just remembered something actually. We did quite a bit of science at the beginning of the week as well, where we talked about space, satellites, how satellites work, how something cannot escape, but its velocity is keeping it moving. That was really good. Need to do more stuff like that. And that's the kind of thing that they should actually be really quite easy to understand, because that's the kind of thing I used to teach them before they went to school.